today's deep dive. We're going to get into a topic that I think has shaped human history in some pretty profound ways. We're going to be talking about religion. And we're going to be doing this through the lens of Christopher Hitchens' book, God is Not Great. Now, Hitchens was a very vocal atheist and critic of religion, so we're kind of going into this knowing we're going to be encountering some ideas that are, well, a bit controversial.
Yeah, definitely. And it's important, I think, to state right off the bat that our aim here isn't to try to convert anyone to atheism or anything like that. I mean, it's more about, presenting the arguments that Hitchens lays out, exploring the evidence he uses, and hopefully, prompting some critical thinking about religion's role in the world, but also, maybe in your own life.
Yeah, and I think one of the things he does right off the bat is he kind of makes this interesting point about the burden of proof. He argues that, the onus shouldn't be on skeptics to disprove supernatural claims, but rather on believers to provide the evidence. He actually rejects faith as a valid foundation for belief, and he kind of puts a lot of emphasis on reason and tangible evidence.
And he sort of illustrates this by comparing, like, the approach of science to that of religion. Like, think about, for example, how evolutionary biologists like Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Dawkins debated intensely about certain aspects of evolution, but they might have disagreed strongly, but they used evidence and logical reasoning to resolve those differences, not excommunication or holy wars.
Yeah, that's a good point. It makes you think, how different would history have been if more scientific debates were settled with crusades rather than peer-reviewed papers?
One of the most controversial claims that Hitchens makes is that religion is inherently destructive, and he kind of supports this by cataloging numerous examples, both historical and contemporary, of violence, oppression, and cruelty.
Yeah.
All carried out in the name of religion.
And it's not just these vague generalizations either. He gets into some very specific cases. Take, for instance, Mother Teresa. Now, she was obviously, widely admired for her charitable work, but Hitchens also points out that she actively campaigned against divorce in Ireland.
And her stance on divorce, which was, very much in line with Catholic doctrine, essentially meant that many women who were, trapped in abusive marriages were forced to remain so.
Mm-hmm.
So Hitchens kind of argues that, in this instance, her religious convictions took priority over the well-being of these vulnerable women.
Yeah. It's kind of a sobering reminder that acts of kindness and religious belief don't always go hand in hand. Another example Hitchens uses is, the violence that we often see between Sunni and Shiite Muslims, particularly in Iraq.
He describes how Sunni extremists will deliberately target, Shiite mosques and funerals, for instance. And this is all to stir up sectarian violence and to sabotage any attempts at peace. It's a clear example of religion being used not to promote unity, but actually to create conflict and suffering.
And then there's also the case of Salman Rushdie, who faced a global campaign to assassinate him for his novel, The Satanic Verses. And what's really disturbing about this is, this wasn't just some fringe extremist group calling for his death.
Yeah, there were quite influential figures, even within the Vatican and the Church of England, who expressed sympathy for the Ayatollah's, death sentence on Rushdie. They argued that, blasphemy was the real issue here. It's almost like they were condoning state-sponsored murder.
It really makes you think about the power of religious conviction and how it can sometimes be used to justify, some truly horrific acts. Hitchens also goes on to argue that the core metaphysical claims of religion are actually demonstrably false.
And he spends quite a bit of time kind of dismantling those arguments from design, those arguments that claim that the intricate complexity of life or the grand scale of the universe point to, some intelligent designer. Hitchens argues that these are arguments that are really rooted in human ego rather than, actual evidence.
He even has a rather humorous term for intelligent design.
He does. He calls it jumbo mumbo. He sees it as just a rebranding of old creationist ideas. And Hitchens suggests that, we're kind of looking at things backward. We marvel at the unique conditions that allow for life on Earth, because, we're here to marvel.
So it's more about our own perspective than, any divine plan.
Right, exactly. And Hitchens also points to the, vastness and often chaotic, even hostile nature of the universe as, as evidence against a benevolent designer.
Yeah, I mean, after all, our sun is going to explode and, swallow up the Earth eventually. Not exactly a hallmark of intelligent design.
Indeed. And, Hitchens argues that our scientific understanding of the universe has surpassed the simple explanations that religion offers. And he goes on to examine the origins of religion, and he suggests that many faiths actually arose from, less than noble motives, things like power, wealth, and a desire to control others.
Yeah, he uses some pretty colorful examples to illustrate this point. Like, for example, he talks about the story of Marjo Gortner, the child evangelist.
Right. Gordner was basically, raised from a baby to preach, and he became, incredibly successful, made millions of dollars. But when he got older, he actually turned against his parents and revealed that the whole thing was basically a calculated money-making scheme.
So he was just putting on an act from the beginning.
Yeah, completely. He even made a documentary about it called Marjo, which won an Academy Award. And it really kind of exposed, the manipulative underbelly of the evangelical movement.
Right.
Showing how people's faith could be exploited for profit.
I can imagine that was pretty shocking to a lot of people.
It definitely was. And Hitchens actually draws a parallel between this kind of exploitation and the origins of Mormonism.
He goes pretty deep into the story of Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism,
Yeah.
and all those revelations and translations of ancient texts. Hitchens actually makes a case that these were demonstrably fraudulent.
Right. Smith claimed to have, found these golden plates inscribed with the history of this lost tribe of Israel. But conveniently, he said that he couldn't show them to anyone because it would mean death. He actually dictated his quote-unquote translation to scribes while hiding behind a blanket,
I mean, come on, that sounds a little fishy.
to say the least. And, unsurprisingly, scholars later discovered that significant portions of the Book of Mormon were, lifted directly from the Old and New Testaments.
So plagiarism, not divine inspiration.
Exactly. Hitchens argues that Joseph Smith was essentially a con man who very skillfully combined religious zeal with personal ambition.
And he points out that, Smith's methods actually bear a striking resemblance to, the origins of Islam, both involving these claims of divine revelation through, intermediaries, relying on, oral traditions and texts whose authenticity is, well, highly questionable.
It's a pattern that we see repeated throughout religious history.
So let's address the big question that always seems to come up, Does religion actually make people behave better?
Well, Hitchens argues that there's really no evidence to support that claim. In fact, he suggests that religion has often been used to justify terrible acts.
He compares the actions of, devout believers with those of prominent atheists to kind of make his point. He asks, for example, was Evelyn Waugh, the devout Catholic, demonstrably more moral than A.J. Ayer, the atheist philosopher?
Or, was Colonel Robert Ingersoll, who was, a leading advocate of unbelief, any less ethical or generous than his religious contemporaries?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. It kind of challenges that common assumption that, you need religion to be a moral person.
Right. And Hitchens actually argues that secular ethics and humanism provide a much more solid foundation for ethical behavior.
So you can have good people with or without religion.
And conversely, religion doesn't prevent people from committing evil acts. One of the darkest examples Hitchens uses is the genocide in Rwanda. Yeah, that was a truly horrific event where, Hutu extremists massacred hundreds of thousands of Tutsis. And what's chilling about it is that, many of the perpetrators would actually, seek absolution from priests before and after committing these atrocities.
So in this case, religion was used not only to justify, but also to sanctify mass murder.
And it makes you wonder, how much did religious indoctrination play a role in fostering this kind of fanaticism? So, Hitchens presents a pretty strong case against the idea that religion has any inherent moral superiority. But, what about all the charitable work that religious organizations do? Surely that has to count for something.
Right. Hitchens acknowledges the good work done by religious charities and individuals, but he stresses that compassion and kindness aren't exclusive to believers.
So you're saying like secular organizations and individuals are just as capable of doing good in the world. Exactly. He even points out that some of the most effective humanitarian organizations are actually secular, you
Yeah.
know, and they're often more efficient and less driven by dogma than their religious counterparts.
Which kind of suggests that it's not really about religious belief itself, but more about, just basic human empathy and that desire to help others.
Exactly. One area where religion often clashes with science is in the realm of health.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Hitchens definitely goes after that. He argues that throughout history, religion has often been hostile to medicine and scientific progress.
Think about it. What happens to the faith healer or the shaman when modern medicine comes along and starts, proving its effectiveness time and time again.
They lose their authority and mystique.
Right, exactly. Hitchens uses the example of polio, which was, on the verge of being eradicated worldwide thanks to vaccines.
But then religious leaders in some parts of the world, they intervened.
Right. In northern Nigeria, a group of Islamic clerics issued a fatwa declaring the polio vaccine to be a Western plot to sterilize Muslims.
And people believed them.
Yeah, it's tragic. Polio cases surged within months, not just in Nigeria, but in other countries as well because of, travel and pilgrimages. Disease that was almost wiped out came roaring back because of, well, religious dogma.
It's a devastating illustration of how distrust of science fueled by religious belief can have real consequences, tragic consequences. Hitchens also delves into the issue of AIDS in Africa.
He criticizes religious groups, particularly the Catholic Church, for their staunch opposition to condoms.
Even though condoms are, proven to be effective in preventing the spread of HIV.
Right, but their stance is based on the belief that abstinence is the only acceptable form of birth control.
And Hitchens argues that this rigid adherence to religious doctrine has actually contributed to the severity of the AIDS epidemic in Africa.
He points out that many religious leaders actually perpetuate this dangerous myth that AIDS is a punishment from God for sexual immorality.
And that having sex with a virgin can cure the disease, which is, of course, completely false and incredibly harmful.
Yes, absolutely. Hitchens believes that this kind of misinformation has a very real cost in human lives.
And he also talks about, the taboo surrounding sexuality that's so prevalent in many religions.
Right. Think about, all the restrictions and the shame associated with sex, prohibitions on certain sexual acts, the obsession with virginity.
He argues that this stems from a deep-seated fear of the human body and its natural impulses.
He sees it as a form of repression that ultimately does more harm than good.
And he doesn't shy away from calling out the hypocrisy he sees in religious leaders who preach sexual purity while engaging in abusive behavior themselves.
Yeah, he brings up the widespread sexual abuse scandal within the Catholic Church as the prime example.
He argues that this scandal is a direct consequence of the church's unhealthy emphasis on celibacy.
And he believes that it creates an environment where repression and abuse are more likely to flourish.
Yeah, it's a really dark side of religion that can't be ignored.
And it raises some serious questions about the moral authority of institutions that claim to be guiding people toward righteousness.
So we've seen how religion often clashes with science and has some problematic views on sexuality. What about its relationship with political ideologies? Hitchens examines how religion interacted with some of the most brutal totalitarian regimes of the 20th century.
Yeah. Let's start with the fascism. This was a movement that emphasized nationalism, traditional values, and strong authoritarian leadership.
And it found fertile ground in Catholic countries like Italy.
Right. The Catholic Church, they saw fascism as a defense against the perceived threat of communism.
And they weren't exactly subtle about aligning themselves with fascist leaders.
No. Pope Pius XI even went so far as to call Mussolini a man sent by Providence.
So the church was basically complicit in the rise of fascism.
Well, Hitchens argues that they were more than just complicit. They actively supported and legitimized fascist regimes.
And what about Nazism?
Yeah, that's a particularly dark chapter in history, and the role of religion there is complex and controversial.
Some people argue that that Hitler was an atheist.
Right. But Hitchens rejects that idea. He points out that Hitler frequently invoked God and Christianity in his speeches.
And Nazi ideology was also, deeply rooted in anti-Semitism, which has its origins in religious prejudice.
Right. Hitchens argues that the Holocaust wasn't a rejection of Christian values, but actually a perversion of them.
So he's saying that centuries of Christian anti-Semitism created a climate where the Holocaust became possible.
Exactly. It's a stark reminder of the dangers of religious intolerance.
And then finally, there's Stalinism. How did religion fare under communist rule?
Well, officially, communist regimes were atheist.
But Hitchens argues that they didn't really eliminate religion. They just replaced it with a new form of idolatry.
Yeah. Think about the cult of personality that surrounded Stalin.
The propaganda, the show trials, the worship of the leader.
It all had distinct echoes of religious fanaticism.
And the communists were just as ruthless in persecuting dissent as any religious inquisition.
We viewed anyone who challenged their ideology as a threat to be eliminated.
Yeah. So it seems like whether it was fascism, Nazism, or Stalinism, religion either supported or was co-opted by these totalitarian regimes.
And Hitchens argues that this demonstrates the dangers of absolute belief. Whether it's based in religious dogma or secular ideology.
So blind faith can be exploited to justify any kind of atrocity.
And that the only antidote is critical thinking and a willingness to question authority.
If religion has been so problematic throughout history, how did we even get to a point where so much of the world still embraces it?
Well, Hitchens traces the decline of religion back to the rise of reason and science.
And he kind of highlights, the contributions of figures like Lucretius, an ancient Roman philosopher who advocated for a materialist view of the world.
Yeah, Lucretius was an Epicurean. He believed that everything, including the soul, was composed of atoms.
So no gods, no afterlife.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And his ideas, although suppressed for centuries by the church, had a profound influence on later thinkers.
So like Galileo and Newton.
Yes, both of those scientific giants were deeply indebted to the work of Lucretius, even though they had to be careful about acknowledging his influence publicly.
Because the church was still incredibly powerful at that time.
Absolutely. But the seeds of doubt had been sown. Then along came Spinoza, a 17th century philosopher who really challenged the traditional concept of God.
Spinoza, he was wasn't he a pantheist?
He was, meaning he believed that God was identical with nature.
So not the personal God of the Bible who intervenes in human affairs.
Exactly. Spinoza argued for a God that was impersonal and all-encompassing.
And his ideas were considered heretical by both the Jewish and Christian establishments.
He was excommunicated from the Jewish community.
Yeah.
And the church banned his books.
Wow. But Spinoza's influence continued to spread even underground, inspiring later thinkers like Einstein.
Einstein famously said that he believed in Spinoza's God, not the God of the Bible.
So this idea of God not as a supernatural being, but as a force within nature itself was gaining traction.
Right, and it really paved the way for the Enlightenment, a period of intellectual upheaval that emphasized reason and individual liberty.
And that brings to mind thinkers like Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson.
Exactly. They challenged the church's authority and advocated for the separation of church and state.
And their ideas had a profound impact on the American Revolution and the founding of the United States.
Yeah, they helped create a society where religious freedom was enshrined in the Constitution.
But that doesn't mean that religion disappeared altogether.
No, but its power and influence were significantly diminished.
And Hitchens argues that this trend is continuing today.
As science continues to illuminate the mysteries of the universe, the need for religious explanations continues to fade.
But what about people's, innate desire for meaning and purpose? Doesn't religion kind of fulfill that need?
Well, Hitchens acknowledges that human need for meaning, but he doesn't believe that religion is the only way or even the best way to find it.
So where else can we look for that sense of meaning and purpose?
He suggests finding it in our relationships, in our work, in our pursuit of knowledge and understanding, and in appreciating the beauty and the complexity of the natural world.
It's about finding meaning within ourselves and in the world around us, rather than seeking it from some external source.
Exactly. He believes that a secular worldview can be just as fulfilling, if not more so than a religious one.
He's urging us to embrace reason, to think critically and to find meaning in the here and now, not in ancient myths and dogmas. It's a powerful message. So we've seen how religion has been challenged by reason and science, but it's clearly still a major force in the world today.
What are some of the specific problems that Hitchens sees with religion today?
Well, one issue he takes on is the concept of blood sacrifice.
Oh, that seems like something from a bygone era.
It might seem that way, but the idea of appeasing God through blood sacrifice is still very much alive in many religions.
Like the animal sacrifices that are still practiced in some forms of Islam and Judaism.
Precisely. Hitchens argues that this is a barbaric practice
Yeah.
that has no place in a modern civilized society.
He sees it as a holdover from a more primitive time when people believed that God required blood atonement. He uses the biblical story of Abraham being commanded by God to sacrifice his son Isaac as a prime example.
Yeah, that's a story that's always been deeply unsettling to me.
It's a story that's often used to justify violence and cruelty in the name of God, and it's used to portray Abraham as a righteous man because of his willingness to obey. But Hitchens challenges that interpretation.
He sees it as a morally bankrupt story that we should be questioning, not celebrating.
He's arguing for a morality that's grounded in reason and compassion, not blind faith and unquestioning obedience.
And another concept Hitchens challenges is the idea of original sin.
This is the belief that we're all born cheated by the sin of Adam and Eve, and that we're inherently flawed and in need of redemption.
It's a pretty pessimistic view of human nature.
It is, and Hitchens sees it as a way for religion to exert control over people through guilt and fear.
It's like we're all carrying this burden of sin that we can never really escape.
And Hitchens rejects the notion that humans are inherently sinful beings. He believes that we're capable of both great good and great evil, and that our choices aren't predetermined by some ancient transgression.
It's a more empowering perspective, isn't it? The idea that we have the capacity to choose our own paths.
Yeah, absolutely. He argues that this is a more honest and realistic view of human nature.
But what about the idea of redemption through Christ's sacrifice? That's a core belief in Christianity.
Hitchens rejects that notion too. He argues that the concept of someone else paying for our sins is not only illogical but also morally repugnant.
So we can't just offload our responsibility onto someone else, even if that someone is supposedly divine.
Exactly. He believes that we're each responsible for our own actions, and that we can't simply shift that burden onto someone else.
It's about owning up to our choices and their consequences.
It is. He's arguing for a morality that's based on personal responsibility and accountability.
Another problem Hitchens has with religion is the concept of eternal punishment.
The idea of hell, where sinners are tormented for all eternity. It's a particularly cruel and sadistic doctrine.
It seems designed to instill fear and obedience, doesn't it?
That's exactly what Hitchens argues. He finds it especially abhorrent that the threat of eternal damnation is often used to control children.
It's a form of psychological abuse, really. Threatening children with eternal suffering is a terrible way to try to shape their behavior.
It is, and Hitchens argues that no loving God would ever subject their creation to such a fate.
He sees it as a barbaric invention, a tool of manipulation rather than a reflection of divine justice.
Exactly.
Hitchens also takes issue with the many impossible tasks and rules that religions often impose on their followers.
Think about all those commandments and prohibitions that we find in religious texts.
Like the Ten Commandments, for example.
Yes, but also all the additional rules and interpretations that have been added over the centuries by various religious authorities.
Hitchens argues that many of these rules are arbitrary and impossible to follow consistently.
He sees it as a deliberate tactic to keep people in a perpetual state of guilt and striving, a way to maintain control.
Because, if you can never quite live up to the rules, you'll always feel dependent on the institution that sets those rules.
That's the idea. Hitchens argues that this is a theme of control that prevents people from living truly authentic and fulfilling lives.
He challenges the notion that we need to live according to a set of ancient rules that may have made sense in a different time and place, but are often irrelevant or even harmful in the modern world. One of Hitchens' biggest concerns is the impact of religion on children.
He's particularly troubled by how religion is often used to indoctrinate children.
He goes so far as to call religious education a form of child abuse.
He feels very strongly about this. He argues that children are incapable of giving informed consent to religious beliefs, and that they're often coerced into accepting those beliefs through fear and intimidation.
It's easy to see how that could be the case, especially for children who are raised in very religious households or communities.
He's especially critical of religious schools that teach children that their religion is the only true one, and that all other religions are false.
That kind of exclusivity can be really damaging. It sets the stage for intolerance and prejudice.
Exactly. Hitchens believes that this kind of indoctrination is harmful to a child's development because it stifles their critical thinking skills and their ability to form their own beliefs.
He advocates for a secular education system that teaches children to think for themselves and to respect the beliefs of others, regardless of their religious background.
That's what he believes will lead to a more tolerant and harmonious society.
Another area where Hitchens sees religion having a negative impact on children is in the realm of sexuality. It's a topic that many religions are quite uncomfortable with.
He's particularly critical of the taboo surrounding masturbation that exists in many religions.
It seems like such a bizarre thing to make taboo, but it can cause a lot of shame and anxiety for young people.
It can. And Hitchens points out that religious authorities often spread myths and misinformation about the supposed dangers of masturbation,
which of course have no scientific basis.
Right. He sees these myths as a way to control people's sexuality, and he argues that masturbation is a normal and healthy part of human development.
It's about time we stop treating it as something shameful or sinful.
Hitchens would certainly agree with you there. He advocates for a more enlightened and accepting view of sexuality, one that's free from the constraints of religious dogma.
Hitchens also addresses the issue of circumcision, which is often justified on religious grounds.
He sees it as a form of genital mutilation that's often performed on infants without their consent.
And he's especially critical of it when it's done for religious reasons rather than out of medical necessity.
He argues that it's a violation of human rights to perform this procedure
Yeah.
on a child who can't give their consent.
He believes that that bodily autonomy is paramount, and that parents shouldn't be allowed to make this decision for their children based solely on their religious beliefs.
It's a powerful argument that challenges the authority of religion to dictate medical decisions.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. It seems like Hitchens views religion as a force that's done more harm than good throughout history.
He does. He sees religion as having been used to justify violence, oppression, and ignorance. But he also recognizes that religion can inspire acts of great compassion and kindness.
It's important to acknowledge that duality, right?
Absolutely. He just doesn't believe that those acts are exclusive to believers, or that they outweigh the harm that religion has caused throughout history.
So what does he offer as an alternative? What does he suggest we put in place of religion?
Hitchens advocates for a secular worldview that's based on reason, science, and humanism. A worldview that embraces our shared humanity and encourages us to find meaning and purpose in the world around us, not in ancient myths and dogmas.
He's not saying that life without religion is easy or without challenge.
No, but he believes it's a more honest and fulfilling way to live.
He's asking us to embrace our mortality, to take responsibility for our actions, and to find joy and meaning in the here and now, not in some promised afterlife.
It's a bold vision, but it's one that resonates with many people.
It certainly gives us a lot to think about. Let's move on to part 3 of this deep dive, where we'll continue to explore Hitchens' arguments. So, we've been going through some of Christopher Hitchens's, really pretty scathing critiques of religion, and we've explored both, its historical and contemporary kind of shortcomings. But it's interesting how, even as he argues, for a secular worldview, he also acknowledges that, religion seems to tap into something, very, very deep within us, something primal.
Almost as if those ancient impulses, those echoes of, rituals and beliefs that predate organized religion are still kind of woven into our very being.
It's a fascinating point. It makes you wonder, is religion something we consciously choose, or is it somehow ingrained in human nature? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Hitchens uses the example of the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, to illustrate this idea. Millions of Muslims from all over the world gather to perform this series of rituals, many of which actually have roots in pre-Islamic, even pagan practices.
The circling of the Kaaba, the kissing of the black stone. It's almost like this anthropological mystery unfolding in the modern world. What do you think it is that draws people to these ancient rituals?
Hitchens suggests it taps into this deep-seated need for connection, for belonging, for ritual, and those needs they persist even if we reject the specific doctrines or deities associated with those rituals.
Yeah, it's like those rituals are speaking to a part of us that transcends any particular religion.
Exactly, and Hitchens points out that we see this same pattern in Christianity. Many Christian rituals and beliefs are actually borrowed from earlier pagan traditions.
He even talks about the timing of Christmas.
Right. The date was chosen to coincide with the Roman festival of Saturnalia, which was a pagan celebration of the winter solstice. It was a strategic move to make the transition to Christianity more palatable.
So even though Christianity claims to have, superseded paganism, it still carries these traces of those earlier belief systems. It's a reminder that, religious ideas are constantly evolving, adapting, borrowing, and blending with each other.
And even in our supposedly secular age, Hitchens points to the persistence of belief in miracles.
And he's especially critical of the Catholic Church's process for canonizing saints. They require evidence of miracles to justify sainthood.
Right. Hitchens argues that these miracles are often fabricated or based on misunderstandings of natural phenomena.
He uses Mother Teresa as an example, right?
Yeah. Yes. He discusses the supposed miracle that led to her beatification. It involved the alleged healing of a woman with a tumor.
But I remember reading that there were actually medical explanations for her recovery.
Exactly. Doctors who treated the woman disputed the claim of a miracle,
Yeah.
saying that she had been receiving conventional medical treatment.
So it seems like Hitchens is suggesting that the church is sometimes willing to overlook, evidence and reason to advance its own agenda.
That's his argument. He sees it as a cynical manipulation of people's faith.
It makes you wonder how much of what we consider "quote unquote" miraculous is simply, a lack of understanding about the world around us.
That's a question Hitchens certainly wants us to consider. He argues that this blind faith in miracles can actually prevent people from seeking real, practical solutions to their problems.
So after all of this, what does Hitchens ultimately conclude about religion? Where does he think it's headed?
Well, he believes that religion is fundamentally a product of human imagination, a way for people to cope with the uncertainties and fears of existence. But he also argues that it's a dangerous and outdated way of thinking.
So he seems to think that as science and reason continue to advance, religion will continue to decline.
He does, but he's also realistic enough to acknowledge that religion probably won't disappear entirely. He recognizes that the human need for meaning and purpose is very deep seated.
It's almost as if we're hardwired to search for something beyond ourselves.
Perhaps we are. But Hitchens hopes that more and more people will come to embrace a secular worldview based on reason, compassion, and respect for the natural world.
So where does that leave us? What are we supposed to take away from all of this?
Well, Hitchens wants us to think critically about religion, to question its claims, and to challenge its authority.
He's not telling us what to believe.
No, he's encouraging us to think for ourselves,
To find our own meaning and purpose, not in ancient dogmas, but in the world around us.
and to live our lives with courage, compassion, and a commitment to truth.
It's a pretty inspiring message to end on. I think we've covered a lot of ground, exploring some challenging and thought-provoking ideas.
We have, and if this deep dive has sparked some curiosity, made you question some assumptions, or even just encouraged you to think about religion in a new way, then I think it's been a success.
I completely agree. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of religion as seen through the eyes of Christopher Hitchens. Until next time, keep those minds open, keep questioning, and keep exploring.